Hello, this is Gavin Palmer with Write and Gavin Palmer YouTube channel. And today I will investigate what happened in Nashville, and I will use GPT-4 to help me understand the different points of view about what happened in Nashville. So here we go. So the first thing I did was ask GPT-4, what is an example of a reputable source? And this is in the context of using GPT-4 to talk about the news. And GPT-4 responded with the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, BBC News, National Public Radio, The Guardian, and the Washington Post. So I went with National Public Radio for now because at one point in my past I paid attention to National Public Radio. So let's go to National Public Radio and search for Nashville. And I searched for Nashville, and at the top is the Nashville school shooting highlights the partisan divide over gun legislation. And so that's the topic, I guess. This is at least one of the topics. So let's use GPT-4 to investigate the topic of gun legislation. So I asked GPT-4 to steelman the position of people who want better gun legislation to help prevent school shootings. And GPT-4 responded, steelmanning an argument involves presenting the strongest version of the opposing view, even if you don't personally agree with it. Here's a steelman of some reasons people might want better gun legislation to help prevent school shootings. Number 1, protection of children and communities. Advocates for better gun legislation argue that the primary goal is to protect children, educators, and communities from the devastating impact of school shootings. They believe that enacting stricter gun laws can help reduce the risk of these tragedies and create safer environments for learning and growth. Number 2, reducing access to firearms for high-risk individuals. Supporters of better gun legislation argue that stricter background checks, waiting periods, and mental health evaluations can help prevent high-risk individuals, such as those with a history of violence, criminal records, or severe mental illness, from obtaining firearms. Number 3, restricting certain types of firearms and accessories. Advocates for better gun legislation might argue that restricting access to military-style assault weapons, high-capacity magazines, and bump stocks can reduce the lethality of mass shootings and limit the potential for large-scale casualties in school shootings. Number 4, encouraging responsible gun ownership. Supporters of better gun legislation often emphasize the importance of responsible gun ownership. They argue that measures such as mandatory safety training, secure storage requirements, and child access prevention laws can promote responsible gun use and reduce the risk of accidental shootings or unauthorized access to firearms. Number 5, evidence from other countries. Advocates for better gun legislation often point to the experiences of other countries with stricter gun laws where school shootings and gun violence are less prevalent. They argue that adopting similar policies in the United States could lead to a reduction in school shootings and overall gun-related deaths and injuries. Number 6, comprehensive approach to prevention. Supporters of better gun legislation emphasize that gun control measures should be part of a comprehensive approach to preventing school shootings. They argue that combining gun control measures with increased mental health support, school security enhancements, and violence prevention programs can create a multifaceted strategy to address the root causes of school shootings. Please note that these points do not necessarily represent my own views. That's the disclaimer. Then I asked, steelman the position of people who do not want better gun legislation to help prevent school shootings. And so here are those that do not want gun legislation. Number 1, Second Amendment rights. Opponents of better gun legislation often emphasize the importance of the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which protects the right to bear arms. They argue that additional gun control measures may infringe upon this constitutional right, which they see as essential to individual freedom and self-defense. Number 2, self-defense and protection. Those against better gun legislation might argue that firearms are necessary for personal protection and that restricting access to guns could leave law-abiding citizens more vulnerable to crime, including mass shootings. They may contend that Allowing responsible individuals to carry firearms could deter potential attackers and even stop active shooter situations. Number 3, ineffectiveness of gun control measures. Critics of better gun legislation may question the effectiveness of gun control measures in preventing school shootings or reducing gun violence overall. They might point to instances where strict gun laws have failed to prevent mass shootings, suggesting that other factors such as mental health and societal issues play a more significant role. Number 4, enforcement of existing laws. Some opponents of better gun legislation argue that the focus should be on enforcing existing laws more effectively rather than introducing new legislation. They may contend that many of the issues related to gun violence could be addressed by improving background check systems, prosecuting individuals who attempt to purchase firearms illegally, and providing more resources to law enforcement. Number 5, addressing underlying issues. People against better gun legislation might argue that the focus should be on addressing the root causes of school shootings, such as mental health, bullying, and social alienation, rather than implementing more restrictive gun laws. They believe that efforts to improve mental health services, foster a more inclusive school environment, and provide resources for at-risk individuals could have a greater impact on preventing school shootings. Number 6, fear of a slippery slope. Some individuals may oppose better gun legislation because they worry that any new restrictions could lead to further limitations on gun ownership, eventually resulting in widespread disarmament or confiscation. They see preserving current gun laws as a way to protect against potential government overreach and maintain individual freedoms. So there we have it. We investigated different perspectives, and I know that there are other perspectives as well, but this allows us to attempt to have empathy and an open mind about the issue and trying to understand why people have different perspectives. And I think this is overall good that we try to understand each other. So it appears this Nashville topic also includes an issue about trans community. Advocates fear an escalation of hate toward trans community after Nashville shooting. So we first kind of dove into the different perspectives on gun legislation and gun regulation. So now let's dive into the topics of the trans community and hate. So let's go there. Okay, so I asked GPT-4 to steelman the position that we should fear hate speech. Number 1, incitement to violence. One reason to fear hate speech is that it can incite violence or lead to physical harm. Hate speech can target specific groups or individuals, creating an environment where aggression and violence against them are encouraged or justified, potentially leading to real-world harm. Number 2, marginalization and discrimination. Hate speech can contribute to the marginalization and discrimination of minority groups by reinforcing stereotypes, promoting prejudice, and dehumanizing the targeted individuals. This can have serious consequences for the affected communities, including limiting their access to opportunities, resources, and social support. Number 3, erosion of social cohesion. Hate speech can undermine social cohesion by fostering division and animosity between different groups within society. This can lead to increased polarization, making it difficult for communities to work together and address common challenges. Number 4, psychological harm. Exposure to hate speech can have negative psychological effects on the targeted individuals, including increased stress, anxiety, and depression. This can be particularly harmful for vulnerable populations such as young people and members of minority groups who may already face challenges related to their identity and social standing. Number 5, suppression of free expression. While hate speech is a form of expression, it can also be used to silence or intimidate others, particularly those from marginalized communities. Fear of retaliation or social ostracism may lead individuals to self-censor or avoid discussing certain topics, which can limit the diversity of ideas and opinions in public discourse. Number 6, normalization of hateful attitudes. When hate speech is left unchallenged, it can contribute to the normalization of hateful attitudes and behaviors, making them seem more acceptable and prevalent within society. This can embolden individuals to act on their prejudices and potentially lead to an increase in hate crimes and discrimination. Then I asked, still man the position that we should not fear hate speech. Number one, freedom of speech. Advocates for not fearing hate speech often emphasize the importance of freedom of speech, and as enshrined in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and other similar principles worldwide. They argue that protecting all forms of speech, even those that are offensive or hateful, is essential for maintaining free and open society where ideas can be exchanged and debated. Number two, marketplace of ideas. The marketplace of ideas concept suggests that the best way to combat harmful or incorrect ideas is through open debate and discussion. Supporters of this viewpoint argue that allowing hate speech enables the public to confront and debunk such ideas, rather than pushing them underground where they can fester and gain traction without scrutiny. Number three, potential for misuse. Opponents of regulating or fearing hate speech may worry that attempts to define and restrict hate speech could lead to misuse or overreach by authorities. They argue that broad or vague definitions of hate speech could be exploited to silence dissenting voices, political opposition, or unpopular opinions. Number four, strengthening resilience. Some argue that exposure to hate speech can help individuals and communities develop resilience and critical thinking skills. By encountering and refuting hateful ideas, people may become better equipped to defend their own beliefs and values and to challenge bigotry when they encounter it in the future. Number five, counterproductive effects. Opponents of fearing hate speech might suggest that attempts to suppress or punish hate speech could have counterproductive effects, such as increasing resentment among those who hold hateful views or inadvertently drawing more attention to their ideas. They may contend that promoting tolerance, inclusivity, and education is a more effective long-term strategy for combating hate speech. Subjectivity. Another argument against fearing hate speech is that what constitutes hate speech can be highly subjective, and it can be difficult to create universally agreed upon standards for determining what crosses the line. By not fearing hate speech, they argue that society can prevent arbitrary or biased decisions about which speech is acceptable and which is not. So I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough on how you might use a large language model to help you have empathy for other people and their perspectives. Because that's all we can do, is we can at least attempt to understand what other people think and why they think that way. What are we going to do about the problems we face? Well, I have ideas, and they are different than most people's ideas. And I would suggest that implementing solutions at the federal government, within the federal government, is risky and dangerous. So, let me know what you think. Bye-bye.